2017 has been a fantastic year for gaming, and today on GameRanks we're going to give you the top 15 games of the first half of 2017. Now keep in mind, this is only the first half of the year. We aren't clairvoyant, we don't know what the best games of the second half are going to be, so we're just talking about the first 6 months here. Number 15 is Endless Space 2, a turn-based strategy 4X. This is a game that easily makes every other 4X look like crap, visually speaking. The sound design is amazing, the music is amazing, and this game absolutely sets the bar as far as visuals for a turn-based strategy game. It's got good writing, so the fact that it focuses on different factions, stories, and elements of progression, it's not tedious or horrific, it's actually very engaging. And aside from the fact that there's not a lot of replayability in it, this is just a top-shelf game. Number 14 is Dirt 4. Dirt 4 for me is easily the best rally racing game. It's got an incredibly comprehensive career mode that's challenging, but not necessarily simulation challenging, because it's still just fun as hell. It's one of those games where you're not playing it for a 100% accurate reproduction. It is not a simulation. You might get some people who will argue about that, and that's fine. In fact, I think it's better that people argue about that, because if you have a game that both the simulation people and the arcade racing people both like, that's actually pretty amazing. And did I mention, this is one of the best looking games, period. Number 13 is Injustice 2. Injustice 2 manages to take a game that was already incredibly good and make it flat out like the best. This is such a damn good fighting game, it's really impossible to say anything other than that. As far as single player goes, I've never had more fun with a fighting game. And not just because it controls so well, but it has an enjoyable and actually interesting story. Am I going to call it an amazing story? Maybe not so much, but it is a fighting game. As a fighting game, it is absolutely the best possible thing. Something that's very accessible and easy to pick up, but legitimately deep and very, very difficult if you want to get in on high-level stuff. It doesn't even matter if you've ever seen anything from DC Comics, ever read one of their books or seen one of their movies, it doesn't matter. If none of that stuff ever existed, this would still be a worth it game. Number 12 is Tekken 7, which, despite not bringing a lot of new stuff to Tekken, it still brings you Tekken in all of its glory. Seriously, what a great game. This is the Tekken we've needed for a long time, too, because it's been a while since we've had a really, truly high-profile Tekken game. I mean, the last mainline Tekken was 2009, and truly it's been in desperate need of an update. Now, Tekken is just easily one of the best fighting games of all time. It's one of the big names for a reason, and there's pretty much no way not to enjoy this, especially since, well, we don't really have a Tekken on this generation of hardware. Or didn't, and now we do. And as far as I'm concerned, that's awesome. Number 11 is Sniper Elite 4, which, although it doesn't exactly have a massive amount of competition, is probably easily the best sniping game, but is in a lot of ways one of the best stealth games as well. It is a full-blown revamped stealth system, which improves in literally every way from the third Sniper Elite. And while the story isn't going to blow you away, you kinda already know what's gonna happen and stuff. It's a World War II game. It kinda doesn't matter, because this is a massive sandbox-style sniping game that, despite being described in that way, isn't in any way a disaster, and on top of that, is a hell of a good time. Speaking of sandboxes, number 10 is Hitman: The Complete First Season, and if you were one of those people that was kind of bummed with the last few Hitman games because they became a bit linear, and you also didn't get to check out this game as it was released episodically, do this. Get this game. This is everything that has made Hitman great over the years, except for ratcheted up to 11. As far as I'm concerned, this version of Hitman is the definitive version of Hitman. It is balanced, it is polished, the levels are huge, they have a million different ways that you can get through them, and frankly, one of the episodes of this game could easily be spent hours and hours and hours of time on, just going through it, doing different things, getting different reactions. It was a bit of a stretch for some people that they did this game episodically, but this is actually the game that sold me on the episodic model. As they work on each one, it seems very much like they're taking their time because each different episode is its own production, and it really comes off that way. Because of this, I think this is easily the best entry to the series. Number 9 is Team Ninja's Nioh, which is an action RPG that manages to give you a slightly Team Ninja take on basically the Dark Souls formula. However, it goes above and beyond in a lot of different ways. Not necessarily making a better game, but definitely a different game. Certainly worthy of your time, just in the way this game uses aesthetics and Japanese folklore to create something that feels just utterly of its own creation. There is nothing really quite like Nioh, despite the fact it is very, very much a cousin of Dark Souls. It is difficult, but the combat is extremely intuitive, although very technique-based, very timing-based. This is not a button masher. But damn, it is a hell of a game. Number 8 is What Remains of Edith Finch, a narrative-driven game. Is a little bit linear, but if you can get beyond that, and believe me, I can get beyond that because I like me some linear games. I just know that not everybody likes the same thing I like. Still, knowing that this is an incredibly detailed and varied storytelling experience about what happened to the Finch family, it presents itself as a series of vignettes with narrative, different settings, and even different mini-games in order to progress. It's a game that essentially keeps itself changing throughout the entire experience and absolutely is in its own class. Nothing is quite like this game, and I think in the case of this game that is definitely a positive. Number 7 is Dead by Daylight, an asymmetrical multiplayer shooter that very much succeeds in a lot of ways that Evolve failed. Now, the concept and setting itself is very similar to the Friday the 13th game, however, it's very hard to call it any kind of a ripoff. They end up being very different in a lot of key ways. There's a killer and several survivors on a map. The survivors have to work essentially their way around the killer. They have to start up several generators, which then give an exit. When the exit is powered, they can leave, and if they leave, they win. Or if the killer kills them, they lose. This is an intense game. It gets all of these really cool audio cues very right, and the team members all have very different abilities, so teamwork is encouraged. It kind of takes the best of the hero-based shooter and applies it to something that is not a shooter. It's sometimes not completely balanced, but it mostly works, and it's fun as hell. Number 6 is Nier Automata. If I had to sell to you in one sentence, I would say it's basically Bayonetta, but with androids and machines in a post-apocalyptic world. And if you described it that way to me, I would be sold. But it's more than that. It's definitely more than that. There's a lot more varied gameplay in this than there is in Bayonetta. That's not to say it's automatically better than Bayonetta, or that Bayonetta is automatically better than this. I think it's just Platinum Games makes phenomenal games, and Nier Automata is an obvious tour de force. Now, there are so many genres packed into this one game. You can literally be playing a top-down shooter one moment and be in a text-based novel the next. And that might sound jarring, but it is not. I don't know how to describe it to you, but somehow this game manages to be the most fluid experience in genre hopping that I have ever had in a video game. I seriously cannot praise this game enough. It is so good. Number 5 is Prey, not to be confused with the original Prey games. This is definitely a different game. Now, if you like the Dishonored games, Prey is going to feel fairly at home for you. If you can imagine Dishonored with a completely different set of powers that do not act in any way like Dishonored powers, with a lot of the inventory management that made System Shock such a great experience, with a bunch of very weird philosophical stuff thrown in, and an ending that may piss you off, it may not. I'm not 100% on that, but if I'm honest, it's just kind of all of the gameplay that makes me like this game. It's not really the story, because the story could literally just be an excuse to do all this stuff, and I think it would be fine, but it is actually a decent story, and I personally do enjoy the ending myself. Number 4 is Persona 5, which is a game that does everything it is supposed to do, only 10 times better than you even expected it to. The Persona series only gets better, and while I'm not going to sit here and say that every single thing about the story or its representation of certain people is perfect, I'm not one of those people. It's really hard for me to deny a game that is just developers at the absolute top of their game, telling a story that is fun, with perhaps the best battle system of the entire series. Everything about Persona 5 is just a triumph. Number 3 is Resident Evil 7, a game that took everyone by surprise, except me. I basically thought it was going to be good. So many people were skeptical of this game going in, but I was like, this kind of seems like it has something to it, because I understand a lot of people were really tired of the vaporware Silent Hills type game, and they were understandably skeptical that this game wouldn't feature any actual combat or things like that, but this ended up being basically the best rounded Resident Evil game since the original trilogy, and nothing could make me happier than to say I kinda expected that. It seemed like they got what made Resident Evil into Resident Evil and introduced it into your face in a way you weren't expecting, and that was just brilliant. I love Resident Evil 7. Number 2 is Horizon Zero Dawn, which is easily the best open world game, the best new IP, and really just a delight. Somehow this game manages to take all of these conventions that we complain about in basically every other game and make them actually pleasant to do. You find a tower, oh, there's a unique way of unlocking it, and it's different for every single one of them. The world itself actually feels dense and lived in instead of like a big map that somebody made huge so they could say, there's a certain amount of square miles on this map. Ooh, aren't you impressed? No, this is a game. It is a well-designed game at that makes sure that you have something to pay attention to at all times. And in my opinion, that is absolutely what has been wrong with open world games all along. Horizon Zero Dawn gets it and gives you the kind of experience we should have had with every single open world game like this. I never thought I would say I liked a standard open world game this much, but I do. In number 1, we get into the less standard with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This is an open world game, but it gives the player a little bit more agency as to what happens within that open world. There is a story, of course, but it doesn't make you experience it any specific way. It essentially treats the player as somebody who will have emergent behavior, which is, in my opinion, very forward-thinking on the part of Nintendo. But although I will say it's not entirely perfect, still as far as Zelda goes, it is so far ahead, even futurist, in what it attempts to do. It knows where gaming's going, and it does such a great job of capturing that while not making you feel any sort of abandonment. It's still a Zelda game. It's still fun in that way. And I gotta say, as far as Horizon Zero Dawn and this game go, you have the standard and the non-standard, and both of them manage to be like the best open world games of the year, easily. For me, anyway. Couple of bonus titles for you. The Elder Scrolls Legends, which is a surprisingly great collectible card game, available on the PC. It's free to play. It's definitely worth your time. I'd say give it a shot, as well as Torment, Tides of Numenera, a game that continues the legacy of Planescape Torment and introduces it to Numenera. It's phenomenal. What were your favorite games of the year? Of course, we are interested. Leave it in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanks.